Alright, so I was finally able to catch my super red angelfish spawning. This is their second spawn. Once they're done, I'm gonna pull these eggs. The first spawn, I let them try to take care of it, and the majority of the eggs fungused up, and they ended up eating any wigglers. So once they're done, I'm gonna pull them, put them in some methylene blue, and try to do it that way. So I actually didn't have room to move the eggs, so I left them with the parents. And we can see now, if it would focus, there are wigglers. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pull this cone and move it to a separate tank so the parents don't eat the fry when they start swimming. So here's a better look at the wigglers after I move them. You can see them all still attached to the cone. See all the eggs that fungused up. I would remove that, but I don't want to mess with the fry too much. I'm gonna experiment and see if leaving that affects them in any way. But we have some that came off of the cone already, and they're hanging on to the water sprite there. I put the air stone here just to have some current, like the parents would still be fanning the eggs. Kind of doing a hands-free approach to this, not too much intervention. I didn't use any methylene blue. I'm not gonna pull these guys and put them away from the fungus. I'm just kind of gonna see what happens, see if there is the easiest way, which would be just to move them and leave them until they're free swimming. So we'll check back in a couple days and see where they're at. So it's actually 6 days later, and we finally have some free swimming fry. I just put some live baby brine shrimp in for them to feed on. Might be a little early, but I wanted them to have food readily available. Here we have the angelfish fry 2 weeks later, and the pair actually laid again on a piece of slate, and I figured I would experiment and see the first hatch here, which we ended up with about 30 babies. We kind of just did the hands-off approach where we just moved the cone, the breeding cone, to another tank, didn't put any methylene blue or anything, and didn't touch it really when the eggs were fungusing up. And we ended up with 30, so now I have in this vase here separately the other clutch of eggs with an air stone and methylene blue in there. I have it in this tank just to keep the temperature the same, because I don't have enough tanks to dedicate a heater for one batch of eggs. So we'll see. There are some fungused up. Most of those were there already with the parents in the tank, and we'll check back in a couple days and see what it looks like. Checking back in on the angelfish, it's 8 days later. You can see these guys are starting to look a little bit like angelfish. Nice full bellies from the baby brine. And the slate that we moved into the jar with the methylene blue. So not a lot of fungus growth. Most of the eggs have actually fallen off and all have collected. But now we can see some wigglers. I didn't want to move any of the eggs or mess with anything. I just kind of wanted to see how the methylene blue would do. The air stone is on high, so I figured they're getting enough water movement and methylene blue to prevent some fungusing. I'm surprised how little fungus there actually is. There's just a little bit on the right side there. But all these eggs in the front still haven't fungused up, and they're actually starting to wiggle, which is good. So I'll have to start water changing out some of the methylene blue in there. And we'll check back in and see how many fry make it to the free swimming stage versus the 20 or 30 that we have without the methylene blue. So I must have jinxed myself because it's the very next day and all the eggs overnight have fungus like this. I've never seen them fungus that fast. I have It's probably something to do with the circulation in this container, this base. You can see it kind of curves in. So that's a total loss on those guys, unfortunately. So I guess we'll try another container and see what happens. So we actually got 2 more clutches of eggs. One is from that super red pair and the other is from the Philippine blue angelfish that I have. Trying again with this method. I think with this base, as soon as the eggs start falling off, I'm going to transfer them to a different container. And this container, you know, it's not see-through, so it's not ideal, but there are eggs in there, and I think I'm going to leave those and see if we get fungusing like we did with the last one. So we have some wigglers again. We have some that fell off the slate and some that are still on the slate. Last time I ran into issues because I didn't move them at this stage. I didn't think that they could fungus once they were wiggling, but I guess they still can. So I'm going to go ahead and very carefully move them to a separate container. So these guys are in a little breeding container with an air stone in it. I tried to take a lot of the white eggs out. Some of them are just attached to the fry and I don't want to risk damaging them, so I'll keep an eye on them, and if they start to fungus like with the fuzz around it, then I'll probably have no choice but to pull it out. We'll see how these guys do. I've got some that, you know, went through the cracks in the breeding container and are on the bottom of this tank that they'll grow up in, so we'll kind of use these guys as an experiment and kind of see, kind of just dump them in the tank once they're wigglers the next time. So checking in 2 days later, not a lot of fry in the container, but it turns out that this container here, the specific brand one, right here there's a hole in it, so you can see the fry that are falling out there, so that's a weird design. So we actually have all the fry, majority of the super reds, all on the floor of this tank, on the bottom of this tank. All alive still, which is good. Still all wigglers. I haven't moved them. Just, you know, testing this out. This video has become more of a trial and error, kind of learn from my mistakes video. I actually put the Philippine blue angelfish fry in this breeder net to see if I like this better. And so far I do. It won't focus through, but you can kind of see all the fry, how they're more spaced out and they're not, you know, flying all over. I still have an air stone in there, and the tank, you know, it has the main matin filter still putting the water through, so there's good water flow in this versus this container, and all the fry have stayed in, for the most part, in the breeder net versus this container where, you know, they're just all over the place. A couple days later, we have a ton of free swimming fry. So the method of moving them once they were wigglers seemed to really work for me. It's a method I'm going to continue and try to improve on in the future. Even though this is 2 spawns, the individual spawn of the super reds was way more than the first one. Just to show you guys the original spawn here. They look like little angelfish. This video kind of turned into a trial and error, learn with me as I go. Hopefully you were able to pull something from my mistakes, and maybe you got an idea of your own and how to try to maybe get more fry. If you guys have your own techniques you want to share, I'd love to hear about them in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.